The regular meeting of the School Board of Charlotte County, Florida for Tuesday, September 8th will now come to order. Please join us in the pledge to our flag, and leading us this evening is the principal of Deep Creek Elementary School, Ms. Debbie Carney.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and thank you for being here this evening. Dr. Gator, are there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda?
Just one, Madam Chairman. We're going to delete item G1G, ECHS food service contract.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we delete item G1G. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Next, we have reports. Dr. Gaylor.
We have one report, Madam Chairman, on the Deep Creek Elementary School Energy Star Award, and I'll ask Kelly Marachel to come to the front and present this award, please. And Kelly is our energy educator, and Deb Carney, principal, of course, is here with her tonight.
Good evening. The Energy Star was introduced by the Environmental Protection Agency in 1992 as a voluntary market-based partnership to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through energy efficiency. Today, the Energy Star label can be found on more than 50 different kinds of products, new homes, commercial, and industrial buildings. Products and buildings that have earned the Energy Star designation prevent greenhouse emissions by meeting strict energy efficiency specifications set by the government. Tonight, I am proud to announce Deep Creek Elementary School has earned the prestigious Energy Star, the national symbol for superior energy efficiency and environmental protection. The faculty, staff, and students at Deep Creek have taken the energy management program seriously, and by doing everyday small actions, such as shutting off lights when leaving any room, shutting off computers and monitors when not in use, keeping exterior doors closed when the air conditioning system is operating, have all contributed to the success of reducing kilowatts, saving energy, and money. I would like to present to the school's principal, Debbie Carney, careful, that's really heavy, this Energy Star wall plaque, which will be placed on the outside wall near the school's entrance as a visual sign of the school's commitment and dedication for superior energy efficiency. Congratulations to Deep Creek. I would also like to present to the school board a certificate of this awesome acknowledgement as well. This is our fourth school to earn this recognition, and I guarantee more Energy Star labels are on their way for Charlotte County Public Schools.
On behalf of all of the folks at Deep Creek, including Mr. Ziff, our head custodian, because it does take everyone working day and night to make this happen. I think we've worked hard to save our environment, and thank you, Kelly, for monitoring this and helping us with this. And is this for the board? That's for the board. Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Rendell, I'd like to present this to you.
Thank you.
Congratulations for your outstanding efforts throughout the district.
Thank you, your staff, and your students for putting forth all the effort that it takes to conserve. It's not an easy thing to do, so thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Kelly. And this is our fourth school. 3 of our schools that have received this Energy Star Award for contributing to saving energy and the environment are some of our older schools, which is quite an accomplishment. I think we're closing in now on about $5 million in savings with the total energy program that we have over the last 2 years. So good work, guys. Thank you very much.
It's a lot of money to save. Thank you, Dr. Gaylor. At this time, we'll recess the meeting in order to hold a public hearing on the final budget. Dr. Gaylor.
Ma'am, thank you. And I'm going to call our Chief Budget Officer, Fran Brasser, to the podium. There he is, coming up in the back. And for the presentation of the final budget. We'll also have votes on, of course, the entire budget, but the required local effort, prior period funding adjustment, discretionary capital improvement millage rates, and the critical need 0.25 operating millage rates as we go through this process this evening. So, Fran, after months and months of working on this budget, sir, we're looking forward to your presentation this evening.
Thank you, sir. Can everyone hear me all right? Before we get started, I want you to know there's a copy of the budget up here. If anyone would like a copy, if you don't have one already, they're right up here. Copy of the presentation, and just a copy of that little overhead that we had up there initially. We're going to talk first about the district budget here before we get into the millage and the taxes and so forth. What we have here is all the funds of the district. We have the general fund, which is the basic operating fund of the district. It's about $139 million. This is where the majority of all our teachers are paid, where we pay our operating expenses and so forth. The food service fund, this is where we operate the largest cafeteria program, food restaurant in the county. It's about a $9 million budget. We have federal funds. This is pretty much our ongoing revenue funds. This consists of our Title I, Chapter 1, Title II, so forth, IDA programs where we educate children with disabilities and so forth. Now we have some additional funds this year that came into the county school board called our stabilization funds. These are funds earmarked to stabilize the district so that we don't have mass layoffs, whatever. Along those lines, we received about $5.8 million. We are employing about 156 individuals out of this fund this year that would typically be paid for out of our general fund. Because those funds are not available in our general fund this year, those funds were able to be used for that purpose. So we're employing about 156 individuals. Now we also have our stimulus funds. These are funds for, in addition to our regular federal funds, these are funds that were earmarked for Title I, Title II, IDEA programs to expand those type programs to help stimulate the economy. In addition to that, we have our self-insurance, or our insurance and FEMA fund. This fund right here is the funds that we're receiving basically to rebuild our schools that were damaged and destroyed because of Hurricane Charlie, August 13, 2004. These are the funds that are remaining. We estimated our damage is about $250 million. We're down to one school pretty much that has to be completed, and that's Charlotte High School. There's about $33 million left in that fund right now. Debt service fund, these are funds that we received from the state when they bonded our CONDS funds from the past, and those monies are being repaid. We receive those and we pay those out to pay for the bonds that we received in the past. We have our capital projects funds. It's about $24 million in tax revenues there. It's a total of about $58 million. Part of that money is going to our insurance and FEMA fund to help pay for Charlotte High School and numerous other projects. So we'll get into that a little later. Then we have our internal service fund. The majority of that fund is our employee benefits fund. That's where we pay for our cafeteria plan. School board transfers premiums into there. Employees pay premiums for their dependents, and that's paid out of that. That's the majority of that fund right there. Total budget of about $187 million. Part of that is transfers from fund to fund, so we back those out for we got about a $271 million total budget this year. Where do our funds come from? So all funding sources. About 73% of our budget comes from local sources. 16% comes from state sources, and 11% comes from federal sources. Total of about $122 billion. Or it's more than that, $222 million. A separate breakout of that. How much of that is funded by taxes? You can see ad valorem taxes, about 53% of our budget is funded by that. It's about $118 million 47 from other sources. The state funding formula here in Florida, which attempts to provide every district in the state an equal amount per child for education. We're receiving this year, without our stimulus dollars, we're receiving $6,513 per student. That's a decrease over the prior year of 4.76, which in fact was a decrease from the year before that of 4.82%. When you add back in the stimulus dollars, we're about breaking even. It's just a 0.31% increase. That's including the $5,800,000 stimulus dollars for stabilization. How do we spend those monies? This is one of the fashions that we break it down. This is our operating budget. You see it up there by object. Salaries alone, just the salaries, is 64.4. The benefits for our employees, 21.5. That's a total of about 85.9% of our budget. Last year it was 85.7. The only real increase that we've had in this area is our cost of insurance, health insurance. No one received any increases. And this budget does not reflect any increases for employee wages. Here's another way we break it down, and this is by declining order of size. It's a functional breakout. The instructional services is what actually takes place in the classroom. This is your teachers, this is your textbooks, teacher aides that participate right in the classroom. It's 58.5% of our budget. The next largest area that we have is our operational plant. This is where we pay for our custodians, we pay our electric bills, our garbage collections, our phone service, all those type of expenses that relate to operating the facility are in here. It's about $12.9 million. It's 9.7% of our budget. The next largest area is our school administration. This would be our principals, assistant principals, anyone that operates in the school office that helps run the school. Nothing that goes on in the classroom, nothing that goes on in operational plant. So this is just the operation of the school, the administration of the school, about $9 million, 6.8% of our budget. Another large area of our budget, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, is our pupil personnel services. This is where we pay our school aides, our guidance counselors, our social workers, school psychologists, all come out of this area. It's 6.5% of our budget. Then transportation, the last area that's close to 5% of our budget. Pupil transportation, about $6.5 million, almost 5% of our budget. As you continue on, you'll see maintenance of plant. That's the actual cost of maintaining it, maintenance department and so forth. Curriculum, as you continue on, you see it becomes lesser and lesser portion of our budget. When you get down to physical services, under 1%. Board of Education, 0.4%. Debt service, 0.3%. Many people don't understand why we have debt service, but most of our revenue comes from property tax collections. We don't receive the revenue until November and December, so to keep the district operational, up until that time we have to borrow some funds to take care of that. It costs us about $375,000 to borrow those funds. General administration, 0.3% of the budget. Community services, 0.1% of the budget. It's about $133 million together. Now I've added this year we're showing two separate columns there. The AARA Education Stabilization Funds. That's the $5.8 million. You can see it down there on the bottom, funding 156 positions. Typically those positions, if you looked at this last year, that fund did not exist and all those individuals were funded out of our general fund. But as I showed you earlier, our revenues dropped from our school funding formula substantially, and this was earmarked to make up for that. We received those dollars from the federal government. Here's a comparison for our comparative summary for the general fund. This year we're starting out with about $10.9 million as compared to last year of about $17.6 million. As you know, last year, maybe a lot of you didn't know, but we had a substantial cut in revenues. This past year we got hit in the middle of the year, towards the beginning of the year, with a large substantial reduction in state revenues. So we funded a good portion of our budget out of those reserves this last year. Because if you look at our revenues, $125.6 million, then transfers in, we transfer in funds to pay for our maintenance departments, almost $5 million there, plus our insurance, cost of insuring our building, it's another $1.1 million, almost 1.2. So between those two figures, it's only $130.4 million. That's almost $7 million less than we spent the prior year, this last year. So we had to get that in line. So we looked at our budget this year. We're only carrying forward 10.9. Our revenues are only $128 million. That's up slightly. Transfers, total available, we're going to spend $133 million. These two figures combined here are slightly more than that, to a tune of about $600,000 or so. That's why we're able to increase this fund balance by about $628 million. Again, in these appropriation figures, there's no money in there for raises. Now, what makes up our fund balance? Our beginning fund balance this year was the same as our ending fund balance last year. It consisted of categorical carryovers. This is money we received from the state earmarked for specific purposes. We didn't spend it all. It still has to be spent on that. So we carry those forward. Inventory is sitting in the warehouse. We can't really spend that for anything other than just replenishing the supplies out at the schools. We have an FTE audit adjustment. Because our funding is based on the number of students that we have, the state comes in about every 3 years and does an audit of the students that we're reporting, making sure we're reporting in the proper categories and so forth. Sometimes mistakes are made, and we have an outstanding audit there of about $300,000 that we've reserved. So we have a reserve balance of $1.8 million. An unreserved balance that we haven't earmarked for any specific purpose of $9.7 million, a total fund balance of $11.5 million. And that's our operating budget. Our capital budget, which is our next largest budget in the district, capital improvement tax is substantially the majority of the revenue there. It's about $24 million. We're going to take out a construction loan possibly this year, $8 million, to help fund Charlotte High School. Federal mitigation grants, and we have some smaller money. You can see this money that we get from the state for capital projects is very small, $240,000, and that's basically totally for maintenance. That's all we get from the state. This money comes from your gross receipts tax. If you looked at your telephone bill or your utility bills, you'd see that on there. This year, most of that money has been bonded over the past, so there's very little to be redistributed to districts. We're only going to receive $140,000 this year. Capital outlay and debt service, $108,000. Again, most of that has been bonded over the years. So that revenue that's coming in, and this money is from license plate tags. There's only $108,000 we're going to receive this year, other than what's collected that's going to go from the state to pay back prior bonds. We're going to have some interest income. And we've got some other grant. We've got carryover funds. Not all our funds get spent every year. The year they're received, we have projects that are continuing, and those projects are sitting right in here, and they'll be completed this year, the following year, however that flows. The total available funds are $158.8 million. Here's how they're earmarked, how they're going to be spent. New construction, $27 million. There's detail to follow this. Maintenance and repair projects, 13 million. Ongoing projects, about 10 million. And it goes on our facility department, our property insurance, our maintenance department, and the operating budget. These two items I mentioned earlier that we transferred to our operating budget. We have an ending reserve right here in case some of these projects come in higher than what we are anticipating. We've set aside a reserve of about $2.5 million. The construction projects, technical center, we've got $1.7 million budgeted, $10 million for transfer to the capital or to the insurance fund, FEMA fund for Charlotte High, some land acquisitions, safety and security retrofitting. We've received hurricane shutter and lightning rod replacement projects, federal mitigation dollars, and then we got some smaller ones. The equipment, most of that goes to Charlotte High, is earmarked for Charlotte High to furnish the new building. And then we got some QZAB bonds that are used to upgrade our technology at various schools. Maintenance projects, we have ongoing maintenance projects trying to keep the schools current so that we don't fall behind and have to spend a lot of money on maintenance in the future. So we have various fixed building items, about $500,000, telephone equipment that we're replacing or repairing, $722. Bleachers, we keep that under contract to keep the maintenance up on that. Fire alarm systems, and right on down the list, painting, roof repair, replacement, security system upgrades. We have ADA corrections, athletic facility improvements, small remodeling projects, playground improvements, and so forth. Then we have other projects that we spend our capital outlay dollars on. We purchased this year about 9 new school buses are projected to be needing replacement. We got relocatable classroom facility furniture, vocational equipment. These are projects that we continue on to keep our equipment up to date and current so that we don't fall behind in replacing that and find ourselves with a backlog of old equipment. So we set aside money for musical instruments, maps and globes, instructional equipment, vehicles, high school instructional equipment, ancillary equipment, classroom furniture. These are all ongoing projects where we replace things on an ongoing basis. School furniture and equipment, we're doing some upgrades to wiring and so forth. Audio-visual technology plan, about $4.3 million earmarked for technology this coming year. Part of that is carryover from prior year. Our technology department has got behind because we had to replace 6 schools, and they've been busy upgrading and planning and doing those schools. Now, our Hurricane Charlie Fund, recovery fund. This current year, we're estimating we're going to receive an additional $14 million. That has yet to be negotiated and so forth with the insurance companies, but we'll be working on that. That's what we project we have coming. Transfer to capital, that came from our capital project funds for Charlotte High. We have a beginning fund balance of about $9 million. This is how we're spending it. East Elementary, we got a little balance on that. Charlotte High, there's about $22 million to go on that. And then we've got some ancillary facilities here that need to be replaced because they were damaged by Hurricane Charlie. They're the last on the list of items to get replaced and redone. So there's some facilities there to the tune of about $10 million. Then we got modular rentals and so forth. You've all seen those at the schools, at the replacement schools, that we've had modulars, and majority of those are being paid for by insurance. I believe about the only ones we have left is Charlotte High. There's no unfunded or no fund balance at this time. Everything's been earmarked. Now, we can talk a little bit about taxes. Truth and millage. We all got this truth and millage notice in the mail, anyone that has property here in Charlotte County. And a lot of times there's confusion over what does this really mean. And this is kind of how it's calculated. They take your current year gross taxable value this year, established at $6.9 million. They back off the new taxable value. This is value of property that's been added. If there's been a new store gone up, anything like that, a new house, they back those off. And then you get your current year adjusted taxable value. Then you take your prior year gross taxable value. This is what the county was valued at the prior year. Okay. This is the prior year millage rate for the school district. This is the millage rate we actually levied by the school district last year. And this is our prior year taxes. You merely take that figure times this equals this figure here. So that's the taxes we raised last year. The current year rollback rate. Okay, if we were going to levy this amount of taxes based on this property value, our millage rate would be 7.6705 mils. If we were going to levy this amount in taxes. That current year millage rate is this figure. This is what we are actually proposing to levy. This 15.7% increase is this figure, our actual millage rate, compared to our actual millage rate the prior year. When you compare, and this is where the rollback rate comes into play. If you take this figure here, you take the current year millage rate as a percent of this, which is only 95% of that, which shows a reduction. We're actually reducing it based on our rollback rate of 4%. The millage rate has actually gone up, but when they look at the actual taxes you would have levied last year versus the taxes levying the same amount of taxes with a less taxable value, your millage rate would have been higher, and that's where they're comparing those two. So we're actually showing, compared to in the rollback rate, a reduction of 4.1%. We would be taxed, if we were taxing the same thing as we would have taxed to generate the same amount of taxes this year as we did last year, the millage rate would be 7.67. But we're not, the millage rate is actually 7.35. Current year tax is $124 million. The prior year tax is at 95%. We're only allowed to budget at 95% of what the tax roll generates. That's because people take advantage of the discounts. They pay them early and so forth, so we actually collect less. Usually it's just over 95%. It used to be closer to 97%, but people are really taking advantage of that, and it's closer to 95, about 95.5%. So this is what they would have been last year, and this is what they are last year. This is an actual reduction in property taxes revenue to the school board of about $2.6 million. It's a 22% or 2.2% decrease. But that's what your truth and millage is all about, and that notice that you get. When they talk about, there's a column on there that says, if no tax change is made, this is what your taxes would be. That would have been using this millage rate right here. If the proposed, there's another column that says, if proposed tax millage rate is taxes are changed, that's the millage rate they're using. These are our district millages. The taxable value coming across the top, you can see what's happened here in Charlotte County. It happened many places across the nation. Taxable value in 06-07 was almost $24 billion. Came down a little in 07-08. It was hitting us then. Then we suffered a severe reduction here, 19.9%, or $19.9 billion. And now it's down to $16.9 billion. Local required effort. That's this line right here. This is a millage rate that the state legislature dictates that we must levy. We don't really have an option in that. But if we were not to levy it, we wouldn't get any state funds at all. They would just say no funds for Charlotte County Public Schools, and you wouldn't get any of those funds. But we really don't have that option. The law dictates that we must levy this. There's this is the first year for this, a prior year funding adjustment, millage, 0.074. If you have a substantial decrease between the time the property appraiser certifies his tax roll and after people have a chance to appeal their tax assessment, well, not their tax assessment, but their appraised value. And if that goes down they're allowing the school district now to make up the difference because they budgeted on that additional revenue. And because the tax assessments went down between what was initially certified by the tax collector and his final certification, then the school board is allowed the next year to make up that difference based on current property taxes or property assessments. So this year that amounted to .047 mils. I think it's around $900,000. Discretionary tax. This tax we've had right along, it's been averaging about a half a mil, and it went on many years before this. Last year they dropped it to .498 mils. This year what they did, we also see on there we had a supplemental discretionary millage rate. This millage could be up to $0.25 mil, but it could only generate up to $100 per FTE per student. So if you were in a county that the $0.25 mil would have generated well more than $100 per student, then you had to reduce that millage rate. And that's what we've done here. We had to reduce that. Instead of being a $0.25 mil, it was .78 mils, and this year it was .091 mils, and this year it's 0 because they eliminated it altogether. What they did, we're going to take that $0.25 mil that maybe they weren't levying in Charlotte County. Let me add one other thing. If you were in a county that levied the full $0.25 mil and still did not generate the $100 per student, the state would make up the difference. So if you levied the full $0.25 mil and only got $75 per student, the state would give you $25 in addition to that. But the taxpayers in that county would be paying that additional $0.25 mil still. Here in Charlotte County, we didn't get any state money for it, but we didn't have to levy the full $0.25 mil. What the state legislature did is they transferred the full $0.25 mil into this discretionary. So they wiped it out here and put it all in here. And now here in Charlotte County, we have to levy that. So instead of like last year, we levied the .09, now we're levying the full quarter, and it's in here. Okay? So this one's gone away. Now we have a critical needs mills. We haven't had that before. This is the first year for that. It's a $0.25 mil. And districts that certify that they need this, well, they don't have to certify about it. They put it on the ballot saying, not the ballot, but on in their budget saying they need it, and then the school board needs to approve that separately, which they need to do by a supermajority. They need to have 4 out of 5 votes to approve that. Capital improvement, as you can see, that's gone down each year. It used to be, way back when it was 1.5 mils. Then they increased it to 2 mils. And this is what the school board was allowed to levy. Can everyone hear me all right? Every school district was allowed to levy up to that for capital outlay purposes. So you didn't have to go to the voters and ask for any millage for this if you didn't want to. If the 2 mils would cover it and you felt justified, the school board felt justified in levying it, they can do that, up to 2 mils. Well, what they did this year is they took a quarter of that mil and put it up here and reduced what we could levy for capital purposes. And we needed that mil for operating purposes. This year they did the same thing. They took a quarter of it and put it up here. So in addition to this quarter shift and this, we had this quarter shift. So when you get down to the bottom line, debt service millage, we don't have any. So our total millage right now is 6.36 for last year, and it's 7.357 this year. It's basically a 1 mil increase. So for every dollar of taxable value you have, you're going to pay approximately another $1 per thousand. So if you have a property, let's say your property is worth $400,000. Taxable value, not taxable value, but appraised value. And that takes into account your Save Our Homes stuff and so forth. Then you back off your $25,000 homestead exemption, that's $375,000 taxable value. Your taxes are going to be $375 more because there's 375,000 in there. At $1 mil each, that's $175. So if you're, like I said, if your property is worth $400,000, taxable value is $375, you're going to pay approximately $375 more. If you got a $100,000 piece of property, $25,000 homestead exemption, you're going to pay $75 more. Now, if it's non-homestead and it's worth $100,000, you're going to pay $100,000 more because you don't get the homestead exemption. Now, what's really happened here in Charlotte County, one of the things, is that people that have lived in their home a long time, and they paid $50,000 for it, and they've owned since, I think it was about 1991, 92, something like that, we've had Save Our Homes legislation, where they can only increase your assessed value for taxable purposes 3% a year. So you can see at 3% a year, it goes up much slower than if it's at 50% a year, which we had some years. So those people are, in this situation, are playing catch up. In other words, their property might have been assessed a couple of years ago at $300,000. Now they're finding it at $200,000. But their taxable value still may be below $200,000. So they're still getting that 3% add-on. Now, if you're a homestead, a non-homestead property, and you were at $300,000, the 3% Save Our Homes didn't apply. So you've been getting that added on every year. Now, if the property value drops from $300,000 to $200,000, you get the complete reduction. So what has happened is we've got a reversal here. People that have non-homestead property are receiving a larger tax break than those that are homestead property, typically. But remember, over the years, homestead property has been capped. So that's what's going on here. We have increased our millage, like I said, $1 per thousand. It's about a 1% increase here. There's a 15.7% increase, is about 1 mil. But what has happened to the school district? I had a little slide up here earlier that showed the effect of that, but in 2006, 2007, we were generating in Charlotte County $140 million in taxes. The next year it dropped to 139. The following year, we reduced it again to 120, and now it's down to 118. We're not collecting anymore. We're collecting a lot less taxes. Sure, we increased our millage rate of a mil, 15.7%, but we're generating a lot more taxes here. One of the things that people have a hard time understanding is, especially if you got increased taxes, when we were getting some increases here, increased tax, $140 million. Couldn't understand, why do you need all that taxes? Well, the tax formula, or the school funding formula here in Florida has two sources, state revenue and local property taxes. And what the state has a formula that tries to equalize within every district how much money you're getting to spend on each student. So we all get basically the same thing. It's adjusted for cost of living in an area, but we all get the same amount. Well, if we're generating more property taxes here in Florida, then we're going to get less state money. Vice versa, if you're in another county, like maybe Alachua, where you're generating less property taxes per student, you're going to get more state money. So the state determines how much they want to fund education by property taxes and how much by state revenues. So if you're in what's called a property-rich county, you're going to pay the district, collect less in taxes, but they're contributing more to the formula. This is another thing that's really interesting. If you're in a county where 90% more than 90% of your state funding formula revenue would come from property taxes. The state requires you to lower your millage rate. They actually do it for you. Reduce your required local effort to the point where it equals 90%. So we can't fund our funding formula at 95% with local taxes. They reduce our millage rate. Now what happens with that? We have a statewide millage rate, required local effort. This is what was paid by statewide in most counties. So if you looked at another county, they would be closer to the statewide average, perhaps. The statewide average, if we were paying the statewide average, we would be paying more in taxes. You can see the millage rate here, 1.5 more. In 2006, 2007, you would be paying 1.5 mils more on your $1,000, or $1.50 per thousand of taxable value than you would have been, than you did. Now the next year it's the same thing. You're paying $1 and almost $1.25 less because of that 90% rule. This year, in 2008, it was almost $1.12. This year it swung around the other way, less I should say. This year it's the same. We're still below the state average by about 50 cents. So if we were paying the state average rate, you would be paying another 50 cents per $1,000. If you have a home that's valued at $212,000 this coming year, 2009, 2010, based on the proposed rates, you would be paying $1,377 in taxes. It's an increase of $226. If we didn't fall into the 90% rule and you lived in a different county perhaps, you'd be paying an additional $89. This figure across the bottom is what individual taxpayers here in Charlotte County saved by being below the state average. For this home, $267, $215, and so forth. Each one of those years you paid less than the state average per $1,000 of taxable value. That's at a homestead. A non-homestead, it's even more dramatic. $333, $246, $182, and $65. This is just some of the examples to show you if you had a $100,000 home, what your tax rates your taxes would be. So last year on this $100,000 home with the tax exemption of that, you're paying $477. It's just school tax now. This year, without the optional 2 mills, it's $533. With it is $551. An increase of 74. Tax mill, the quarter optional mill is costing you, in this case, $19, basically. If you had a $150,000 home, this is your scenario. If you have a $200,000 home, this is your scenario. If you have a $400,000 home, this is your scenario. We talked about this one already. Approximately $375 right there is your amount. And that pretty much covers my presentation. And this is the slide that we had up there earlier that you can follow. The property values dropped 30% between 2006 2007 and the current year. The school millage increased about 20%. That's what our proposal is. Our tax collections between those 2 years are down 16%. And with that, Dr. Gaylor, I'll turn it back over to you.
If there's any member of the audience who would like to speak or ask questions or make comments, we'd ask you to please get a card back by the door and fill out information on that and give it to Ms. Smith, our board secretary, and then we will call on you in the order in which you fill out the card. In the meantime, board members, any questions, comments to Mr. Brasser? Nothing? Anyone? Okay, this concludes the public hearing. We now resume. I'm sorry, what am I thinking? Is there any member of the audience who would like to speak on this? Okay. Sir? Okay. I thought there would be questions by the board, and we could get some time wasted for that. Sir, could you please come to the microphone?
Microphone, please, sir.
Thank you. And state your name.
Gerald Risley. I enjoyed your presentation. Very, very good, very detailed. And it's very complex. I understand that. To me, the overall comments, as a citizen here, of taxes increasing is not good. We all read about the population of Florida is in a net loss. People are leaving the state, because of increased taxes and other reasons. So, I guess I would hope that I've looked at the county, and they seem to have done a good job in budget cuts. Very difficult cuts, but they did it. I know you've done some here, but I'm not sure how detailed or how cutting they were. But I would hope that people would respect the citizens, respect the fact that a lot of folks are on fixed budgets, and to see the increased taxes on the school board part is very, very frustrating. And just some other comments, I guess. I know in a lot of northern states, the school board are volunteers. They're not salaried people. And hopefully there would be some business people among them. Here, I don't see that we have that. A lot of teachers are out of the classroom. They're on the school board. So now we're paying twice. We're paying for the teacher that had to be replaced and for the salary here. So just a comment on my part that I'm not sure that we have the best system in that respect. So anyway, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Ms. Smith, is there anyone else?
Yes, ma'am. Howard Shaw.
Mr. Shaw, come to the microphone, please.
I had a couple of questions. First of all, have there been any teacher or staff layoffs this year?
There have not been any layoffs. We've just not filled quite a few positions. So as people last year retired or resigned.
What's the number of people that have not been replaced?
55.
55 people. I noticed that on many of the positions that we have, our benefits are running approximately $20,000 in some cases per employee. Is that right?
It's generally 18% of a salary. I can't remember the exact figure.
Looks to me like in many cases it's 20,000. In some cases it's more. A few cases it's less.
I don't have that figure off the top of my head.
When we get insurance increases, are they passed on to the employees, or is the school system absorbing that?
It's a negotiated item, and we're in the middle of negotiations right now, so it's hard to say. Some years we pass it on, some years we don't. So this year has not been determined yet.
Okay, may I ask what benefits the school board gets besides salary?
The same as all the other employees, the same health insurance, the same disability, the same benefits.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got a lot of people leaving Florida. don't know about y'all, but my taxes went up this year. I thought the county did a wonderful job, considering all. But I don't know. School boards just don't seem to get it. That it just is. And I'm not an expert on operating a school budget, but it just seems that school boards just don't understand the plight of the situation right now. Taxes just keep going up as far as schools go. Number of kids is going down, I believe, isn't it? We have
Yes,
fewer
we've had a
children this year.
decrease.
We're babysitting kids before school, we're babysitting kids after school, and that's all reflected in our taxes as well. I don't know what can be done about it, but I'd sure like to be out of Florida myself. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Smith, is there any other citizen wishing to comment?
Yes, John Klenovic.
Yeah, and I'm going to make quite a few, too.
Madam Chair, school board members, Dr. Gaylor, my name is John Klenovic. I am currently serving as the president of Charlotte County's Teachers. A decade ago, voters overwhelmingly passed an amendment to the Florida Constitution that says legislators must make education a top priority. It was 1998, more than 70% of Florida voters demanded that new wording be added to Article 9, Section 1, Public Education for Children. What was added is, I quote, "It is therefore a paramount duty of the state to make adequate provision for the education of all children residing within its borders." The state's not lived up to this standard. Instead, lawmakers have shifted the responsibility for paying for education to property owners. All the state's general revenues, which include sales taxes, fees, in education share declined from 61.5% in 1984-85 to below 48% today. Looking at the GEST education budget, in 1985, state sales taxes and fees paid 65% of the cost of public education. Now sales taxes and fees pay only 47%. The rest comes from property taxes. In 2006, the state had funded in 2006, if the state had funded education at 1985 61.5% level, and if local efforts remained just the same, there would have been $3 billion more in state education budget, a 22% increase, which doesn't include $1 billion in lottery funds. Even at that, Florida would be $500 below the national average in per pupil funding. The Heritage Foundation, a national recognized think tank, found that after adjusting for inflation, Florida was the second worst at increasing its K-12 per pupil funding between 1994 and 2004. Florida increased its per pupil spending by only 8.5% to $7,683 per student. There was only one state with less of an increase. That was Alaska at 5.9. But you have to note that prior to that, Alaska was already spending more than $11,000 per pupil on its children. In 2008-2009, 53% of the education budget was financed by ad valorem taxes. 20 years ago, property owners only paid 35%. While the state is reducing education's share of the pie, voters and lawmakers have been adding more unfunded mandates. All told, it's crippled school districts. Most school experts, lawmakers, finance directors agree that school districts now must abide with less than they were receiving back in 2005, with state requirements to fund more. Lawmakers at the Tallahassee level don't have the fortitude or the guts to create a mechanism for dedicated funding for education. Education Week, one of the most respected journals in the country, gave Florida an F in overall funding in college preparedness. Interestingly, it ranked the state 10th in quality of education. The review basically stated that Florida does more with less due to the hard work of its teacher staff and administrators. Employees work hard without appropriate state funding. Read the paper. All numbers show that there's a disaster looming. We all know it. Stimulus money will run out. It appears that lawmakers at the state level, they're not making plans for alternate funding sources. They're passing it on to you. To help make education cuts, we believe that we have no choice but to levy an additional 0.25 mils. Our children, our community, our future hinges on adequately funding public schools, something that the state will not do, our legislators won't do. To sit down and ask, I guess their answer would be, well, what difference does it make if it's property taxes or we increase this sales tax or we got rid of a couple of exemptions, people pay the same. But it's very clear. They've passed the buck on to you, the people who care about public education, who understand the importance. This district, and I've been in this business for 37 years, this district, in the last 5 or 6 years, I've never been in a place where funding has been so open and transparent. It's there. Every meeting, it's there. Pick up the paper. People can see. There's nothing being hidden. We know where dollars are going. We know there's not enough dollars out there. You're put in a very difficult position, and I can't help but reiterate where you owe this to your state legislators. We as voters need to take a voice to Tallahassee. We ask you on behalf of our children to honor the commitments that we have as a district, to go ahead and vote what's right. We need to go ahead and increase by 2.5 mils so we can go ahead and maybe make it through 1 or 2 more years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Klenvik. And I'd like to make a couple of comments on the couple of speakers that we had this evening. Unlike the county commission and the Punta Gorda City Council, our workshops have not been that publicized about our budget process. I know the county commission has had at least 20 different meetings, and it's been in the paper a lot. And I hear people saying all the time, well, you know, the county commission has cut so much and the city has cut so much. Well, this school board has also cut a whole lot. We have been cut over the last 2 years $21 million, and we have cut an additional $15 million for this coming year. So this school board has cut a lot out of the budget. And every single department and every school has made cuts. Transportation, food service, maintenance, every single department has made cuts. People have not been replaced. Positions have not been replaced. No salaries have been increased. We have been in a hiring freeze for years. This has been a proactive administration. Our superintendent and finance department anticipated the hard times to come, and we have gradually cut back over the years. This has been a very responsible school board, and we have made deep and hard cuts. So when I hear it over and over again that costs are always rising, or the school board there's no end to it, and that's really not true. From 2003 to 2007, there was an 18% decrease in our millage rate. And nobody came here to talk about the decrease in the millage rate, but now the last 2 years, the state, and most of that, and don't forget, the increase the last couple of years has been because of the state. The 1 mil increase that we are incurring this year, 75% of that is mandated by the state legislature. 0.75 mils is mandated by us. We must levy that extra 0.75 mils. The quarter mil is optional, and that's a different thing altogether. But the state mandates we have to, unlike the county commission and the city, they set their own millage rates. We are not allowed to do that. So, and another comment I've heard tonight as well when I go through town is you have fewer students. Why aren't your costs decreasing? Well, there's something called the class size amendment that the people voted in 2003 that has cost this state $13 billion since then, which is about $2 billion every year. We have fewer students in the classroom, which means that we have to have more teachers. So yes, we have fewer students, and they've left for several reasons, and we have fewer students in the classroom, but that means that we have to have more teachers for those students because we have smaller classrooms. So it's hard to understand. I know a lot of these things are complicated, but I really wanted to go I don't want it to go unsaid that we have not done our part in cutting, because we really have. Dr. Gaylor, I know you wanted to make some comments.
Sure. Did we have another speaker?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Smith.
Yes, State
I'll
Representative
comment
Ken
after.
Robertson,
Okay.
please.
Thank you. I'm Ken Robertson. I'm a state representative from District 71, and I'm a member of the Florida legislature. And I just came here tonight to observe the budget process of the public hearing, because I am interested in public education here at the local level and the decisions we have to make in the legislature. And I commend you for the work that y'all do. And we did give you all the option of the discretionary of the quarter mill, and that's your decision to make. Many of the school boards around the state, requested that, and we gave you that option. But I just wanted, I didn't plan to speak tonight, but I just felt like since the legislature was talked about, that I needed to respond. Florida's budget last year was $66 billion, $66 billion, and that was down from a few years ago from $74 billion. And a third of that budget, I don't have the exact figure, but approximately a third of that is dedicated toward education. So the state, we are doing our share. But the fact of the matter is we're living in tough times right now, and we're having to make tough decisions in Tallahassee just like y'all are having to make, and just like people sitting around the kitchen table are having to make. So we're having to live within our means. And just last week I got the revenue forecast, and things aren't looking much better for next year. And so at the local level and at Tallahassee, we're going to continue to have to make tough decisions. And I've said before, if anything, if there's a bright side to this downturn in the economy, it's made all of government, state, local, school boards, everybody take a tough look at how they're making their decisions and run an efficient operation as they can. So I commend you for your work as you do, and I'll look forward to your comments, and anything I can do for you in Tallahassee, I'll be glad to do it. But we're having to live within our means up there just like y'all are having to do down here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Thanks,
Dr.
Ken.
Gaylor.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to make a few comments. First of all, I want to thank each person who came to speak at the podium this evening on the budget. It is, as Ken has just indicated, a budget that, while it's very difficult to understand every facet of it, unless you've been involved in actually developing and administering a budget for a long period of time, nonetheless, I think the bottom line figures sometimes tell almost as good a story as the detail. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate each and every one of them. Mrs. Rendell talked about a couple of things I wanted to say, and I'll just reiterate. On the cut side, with respect to the school district's reductions over the past 2 years, we're well over $20 million into some significant cuts. No one has been laid off. We are a people-intensive business. Kids don't learn by placing them in the middle of a room with a computer and hoping that they learn. It takes people to teach. It takes people to support. It takes people to make sure the lights are on and the rooms are clean, the kids are well fed, and they're transported to and from school. So we are a people-intensive business. When we start laying off people, we start laying off the very lifeblood of the very system that is supposed to be creating the future for our community and our nation. So there have been significant cuts, and we actually began these cuts, and the board knows this, and a number of people who have been here for a number of years, about 6 years ago, right around storm time, Hurricane Charlie time, when we ended up all of a sudden with about 1,000 students less than we had anticipated. And only by the good graces at that time of the legislature and Governor Bush, Jeb Bush, who was in office at that point, were we able to come through that year relatively unscathed. Since then, we've had actually year after year of doing some budget cuts depending on the nature and the type of budget that we've had and been allowed by the legislature. But almost every year there have been some budget cuts. The last two have just been enormous in terms of the 21 million plus that we've actually cut. The other interesting thing that is a real bottom line figure here is that while there are a number of people sitting in this room and out in the community that are paying more taxes as a result of their taxable value and the millage being raised a mill, there are significant numbers of people, and they're not here this evening, as you might think, that are paying less in taxes. Fran's telltale sheet with respect to the taxable values and the taxes paid by the citizens of Charlotte County in 2005, 2006 at $140 million with respect to the school system, being 118 today, means that with essentially the same population that we have in Charlotte County, the population of Charlotte County is paying $22 million less combined. So while there are a lot of people who are paying more in taxes today, as they've just got their property tax notices, there are a lot of other people who are paying less. That's an interesting phenomenon. Yes, the millage rate is going up against a property value in the county that has decreased by what's nearly 40% over the last 2 years. So there's a significant decrease in property value, significant decrease in the actual amount, the literal amount of taxes from 140 to 117 with respect to school district alone. And in order to compensate to some degree, minus $22 million worth of that, the district has been forced to raise, and actually is required to raise by state formula, the millage rate. So that it's interesting when you look at it, because if you look at your personal property tax bill, you're going to see one thing. When you step back and look at it, as we do from an entire county's property tax status, we're paying less. Doesn't make you feel any better if you're paying more individually, I guarantee you. The fact of the matter is the county's paying less for school district taxes. Just an interesting tidbit that we all need to keep in mind. I occasionally will hear somebody say, why don't you run the school district more like a business? And if you look at the business side of our school district, Fran alluded to the fact that we run the largest restaurant chain in the county with 21 restaurants in our schools. We run the largest transportation system. We have the largest set of employees. Think about the number of paychecks, over 55,000 that we issue each year. There's a whole business side to this school district that nobody ever really sees, because you expect that when you walk into a school, you see teaching and learning going on. That's the end product of a whole lot of people doing things behind the scenes to actually keep the lights on and to keep the paychecks coming. So there's a whole business side that we actually run that for most businesses would be their entire business, the entire restaurant business or the entire transportation business. Fairly recently, I had a lot of people ask me that question, why don't you run the school district more like a business? And my most recent response is, what business would you like us to pattern ourselves after? The airline industry, who wrote the book on bankruptcy? The automotive industry and all of the associated industries, who redefined the book on bankruptcy and bailouts? The financial industry, who pretty much took us down into the mess that we're in now, aided by the mortgage industry. I can go on and on and on. So government agencies like school districts who have cut their $21 million in our case significantly while trying to maintain their employee base, which is the lifeblood of their system, are actually some of the few businesses, although you don't think about them as businesses typically, remaining standing. And frankly, the only reason we're remaining standing, and Fran showed that very clearly, is because we and every other school district, the other 11,000 school districts in the United States, actually received the stimulus money to keep us afloat. Because as Ken said, we are definitely in a situation economically most of us haven't ever seen before, maybe have only heard about from our parents. It's a really tough situation. So the state just simply did not have the money. You go from $74 billion in state budget to 66, something's got to go. And in our district, as many of you know, a lot of things have had to go. Paper, pencils, transportation is a huge thing that this board has really struggled with this past year. We've not been able to give our employees to-date raises for 2 years. There are so many things that this district does not do today that it did 2 years ago that I know the general public does not see, does not understand, and I wish that they would. I wish that our community would pay more attention to the school district. We do a good job. We do a great job in many, many ways. We're a high-performing school district and have been designated since the legislature began to designate high-performing school districts. We've been an A school district since the legislature began to grade school districts 6 years ago. We've never failed on any of the tasks that have been given us, educationally or in the business arena. And I just want you to know that. We have already started here a few days ago in the month of August, believe it or not, preparing our budget, preparing our goals and our objectives for our budget for next school year, July 1st being the date that we have to have a budget in place for the school district, the new fiscal year. We've never done that before. We typically start 5 to 6 months in advance in January and February. We're starting 11 months in advance because this situation is so dire that we know that if we don't start right now, there will be significant layoffs in this school district. When that happens, do not expect the quality of education that this school district has been providing. Simply do not expect it. It will not exist. A community, I believe in my heart, which is why I'm in this position, is often judged by the quality of its educational system. Real estate agents tell people all the time, go to this school, go to that school, come to our district because the education is better than in the surrounding district. Now, they may be just saying that to sell the house. The fact of the matter is, the word about a school district not being a good school district gets around. It's vital to the community. Nothing, in my mind, is more important, nothing, than creating the future. And by that I mean those teachers and aides and support staff that work with those kids every single day to make sure that 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, those kids hopefully that will be sitting here and sitting in your place have the maturity, the critical thinking skills, the knowledge, and the wherewithal to do the kinds of things to keep this community, this state, and this country, and hopefully this world afloat. It is so critical, and it, to me, is the best job that anyone could ever have. I believe in the school system. I believe in what we're trying to do for kids and what we do for kids. And I believe in the way that we do it budgetarily and with respect to our business structure that we have in the school district. Hard as it is to see and invisible as it is, keeps the district afloat. So, yes, it hurts to pay more taxes. There's no question. Yes, it hurts to see an additional mill going into the mix of budget formula and state finance formula. No question about it. But I do want you to know the bottom line is that people in Charlotte County are paying less taxes today than they were 2 years ago. On the whole, might not be you or you or you, but there are a whole lot of people that are not sitting here tonight that are. And we're struggling trying to find ways to keep the school district afloat, knowing that we've got $22 million less in revenue and have had to make that much in cuts over the past few years. One other quick thing, Madam Chairman. I get a lot of questions on the issue of declining enrollment because we have declined several hundred students over the past 2 years. And a lot of people will say, well, you know, if you're declining in students, why aren't you reducing your budget commensurately? My answer to that is simple. If you look at the amount of money that we actually have reduced in terms of our number of students that are reduced, the commensurate amount, it's only about a quarter of what we've totally reduced. So if you're looking at a $22 million reduction, the number of students that we've lost only equates to about $6-7 million of that. Okay? So we've reduced significantly more than we had to if it was only a reduction in the number of in the amount of students in terms of our budget. We've reduced way beyond that, 2 to 3 times that. It is a hurtful situation for a lot of us right now because we see a lot of things not being done that we want to have done. What we've been able to do, very proud of it, but I don't know how long we're going to be able to do it, is to maintain, not grow, but maintain what we're doing in the classroom. We're able to maintain teaching and learning. It's at a high level. Our teachers are some of the best I have ever seen. We're able to maintain that. God knows I hope we can continue to do that. Fran, thank you very much for your budget presentation. Members of the public, thank you for your comments. I do appreciate them very much. And board members, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, is there anyone else wishing to speak?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. That concludes the public hearing. We now resume the meeting. Dr. Gaylor recommended action for the RLE, the CIT, the discretionary, and the prior period funding.
Madam Chairman, on this first item, I would recommend that we approve the local required effort of .48120, and actually let me amend that statement. It's accepted. You don't really approve it.
That's correct.
You accept that
Correct.
from the state. Our prior period funding adjustment of .0470, our discretionary of .7480, and our capital improvement of 1.5000 for a total millage. Well, I'll get to that after the critical needs. I'm sorry. I would recommend approval of those 4 millage rates as submitted to you this evening.
So moved. Second.
So moved and seconded that we accept the millage rates as presented by Dr. Gaylor. Is there any board discussion? Mr. Swift.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excuse me. I just wanted to address a couple of the comments made, and all of the millage rate increase that's being dealt with in this particular motion is mandated by the state legislature. We have no choice in adjusting this, what we have just dealt with. The millage rate is actually lower than it was 5 years ago at this time. And as all of you, I'm sure, know, that your tax component is comprised of the rate times the value on your house. If you're caught up in the Save Our Homes issue, you may be still catching up, even though the value on your home has dropped in the last couple of years. You still may be catching up to what that value is, so you would see a tax increase. Maybe you remember, Madam Chairman, but what was the number of districts in the state that had a lower?
7.
Yeah, seven school districts in the state that have a lower millage rate than we do, which is, you know, a good thing for our taxpayers. Again, the class size amendment has played a large part in what we have had to deal with. We have more teachers teaching fewer students, and that's to stay in compliance with the constitutional amendment, which has financial penalties if we don't stay in compliance with it. So it's a kind of catch-22 on that particular issue. That's all I have right now, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Ms. Messina.
Thank you. I listened with great interest to the concerns that the citizens brought, and as Dr. Gaylor said, I know it's not easy sometimes to come up and speak before the board, so I really appreciate the efforts of you coming up and sharing your opinions. My greatest frustration as a board member is the complexity of our budget, trying to explain it to people. And when we look at the numbers going down, but the class size amendment requirements, and that's already been explained by a few people, and the required local effort, it almost seems like we're trying intentionally to be evasive, and we're not. We're just trying to make sure people understand it's not just a black and white, it's not just a very simple linear formula. It's a very complex A plus B minus the square root of C. I mean, it's a very long and complex formula. But I want to share a little story, and that is that I had my budget documents. I came over the weekend and picked them up because Dr. Gaylor, I think you left them in on Friday or whatever, and our budget documents were about this thick. They were sitting on the passenger side of my car, and my 13-year-old son got in the car. The only thing he saw was the top document, the very top document, which showed that in 2006, 2007, we had 140 billion in property taxes, and then in 2009, 2010, it was 117. So that was the paper sitting on the top. And he looked at it and he said, "Mom, that's not good, is it?" I said, "No, honey, that's not so good." And he said, "Is that why I'm not allowed to have wrestling this year? Is that why they cut wrestling?" And I said, "Yeah, that's one of those reasons." And he said to me, "But my teachers will still be teaching in the classroom, right?" I said, "Yes, we're doing everything in our power to keep your teachers teaching in the classroom." And then he said, "Well, but wait a minute. I had Spanish as a 6th grader, and they told me I was going to have Spanish as a 7th grader, and now there's no Spanish teacher for me. So in truth, you're not keeping my teachers in the classroom." To which I said, "Yes, but you still have an English teacher, right, and a science teacher and a social studies." And as one of the fathers who was listening to his daughter sing this evening said to me, he said, "You know, Andrea, you guys have been doing a really good job. The fact that my daughter is still even able to take chorus in an elementary school in the state of Florida is worthy of note." And so I have to say that we're doing what we can to keep the dollars in the classroom and keep as many teachers as we can in the classroom. And so for that, I'm going to absolutely approve this budget, Dr. Gaylor. I know that our district has worked very hard at doing the best they can to keep whatever cuts we could away from the classroom. And as someone with kids in the classroom and a former teacher, I have to support this budget.
Anyone else? Again, all those in favor of accepting the millage rates as presented by Dr. Gaylor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes unanimously. For this next one, this critical need quarter mill, a supermajority, or 4/5 of the school board, needs to vote for this instead of their usual 3/5 of the board, as stated in the state statute. So this is a different vote from any we have done in the past. Dr. Gaylor recommended action for the critical need quarter mill.
Yes, ma'am, and I will refer to this as the fighting chance quarter mill, because that's exactly what it'll give us if the board is willing to approve this evening. And I can make many, many comments on it, but I think you've heard it, in essence, what I had to say a little bit earlier probably covers anything else I might say. But I would recommend that you approve the .25 critical needs millage submitted to you and is proposed by us in the budget this evening.
So moved.
Second. It's moved and seconded that we approve the quarter mill. Is there any board discussion? Mrs. Seifert.
While I prepared for tonight's meeting, the final budget hearing, as well as this critical vote, which I truly believe is one of the most critical votes I've ever taken in my 15 years on the school board, I thought many times over about all the people that had said to me, as it was referred to tonight, "What's going on with the school board? Why don't you have the budget crisis that everyone else does?" And in that respect, I don't think we've been very verbal about the tremendous cuts that we have had and the work that we have done to keep our budgets balanced. Now, this has all been discussed in workshops and meetings, but there hasn't been a lot of whining and crying from our employees or from any of our district administrative people and leaders. So at that point, when I'm asked that question, I'm always very proud to talk about the talents of our leadership, led by Dr. Gaylor and Fran Brasser and Greg Greiner in the financial aspects, and our whole leadership team, because they really do an outstanding job of building our budgets and managing those budgets. It's exemplary how we go through our fiscal years and manage our dollars that we have. We are extremely proactive, knowledgeable, creative, and tenacious. And one of the things that I like best is that every decision is based upon one priority, and that priority is student success. We have had massive cuts. There have been many references tonight to the $21 million in the last 2 years, as well as $15 million more for this year. And yet we really have maintained high student achievement that gives us the designation as a high-performing district and an A district, two things that we should be very proud of as a community. Saving jobs has been a focus for two reasons. One, we value our employees. It's stated in the values of this district. And we also recognize that they are the greatest contributing factor to student achievement. And while some positions have gone unfilled, we are very pleased that there have been no layoffs. What we have reached at this point is what some might call the tipping point. The funding cuts have been covered with successful competitive grant applications, creative cost shifting, stimulus funds for the next 2 years, our energy conservation program, and employees going above and beyond covering responsibilities of positions that have gone unfilled. Really doing what many businesses and many households are doing more with less. But our fiscal and our human resources have been stretched to the limit. The decisions regarding this budget have been very difficult. We've made a number of them, and they have not been easy to make. But they have all been made after lots of study, consideration, and analysis of the impact, especially what the impact would be on student learning. The breadth and the depth of the academic experience that our students deserve and have is going to be compromised if we do not pass this quarter mill. The elementary student who would have fewer experiences and less exposure to things like the music program that we saw tonight won't have as strong a base of knowledge to build the rest of their academic career on without the passage of this quarter mill. Our high school student, without the full range of opportunities that we offer in our high schools today, will leave us less prepared to enter the workforce, to start college, or military service. Each and every one of us really does understand that this is a struggling economy, and we don't desire to add any financial stress to an individual or a family. And we really wish that there was some other means to this end. But our communities and our nation now more than ever need to prepare our students for the multitude of complex challenges that are facing the future. Competing with students from countries where their students go to school 240 to 270 days a year compared to our students going 180. Our students will take their place as adults in our world, and they must be able to read and communicate effectively, analyzing the increasing amount of information that is available to all of us, and make reasoned decisions. Thomas Jefferson supported public education and said that every man can judge for himself what will secure or endanger his freedom if he is well educated. It is a difficult but necessary decision to vote for the quarter mill. It will support student success. It is a vote for our sustained superior performance and an investment in our students' future.
Thank you. Mrs. Miller.
Just very briefly, we don't know what lies ahead for us even in this year. And as we've seen in the past, we can start with a budget and parts are taken away. We wind up with less and less money. We have FTE count, which comes out in October. And for a 9-day period, They will count the children that are in their seats on those days. If a child is homesick or out of town, they are not counted. They are not considered a student in our system, so we lose money there. Something you have to think about, too, is we talk about the swine flu, and October is coming up quickly. What if this would happen and a lot of children would be out of the classroom? This could affect us. So we truly need a backup for future adjustments, for FTE count. There's just so many needs for it, and I agree, too. I think it's a necessity.
Anyone else, board members? Mr. Swift?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've anguished over this particular portion of this for several weeks, and it was really only toward sometime in the last couple of weeks that I started to come to grips with what my decision must be. And I think one of the tipping factors in that was that we got some information that under our current health insurance plan, we could see a rate increase this year of anywhere from 19 to 26%, which is in round numbers $2 to $2.5 million, I think. And if we take a contingency fund that has a gross amount of $11.25 or $11.5 million in it, and were to eliminate this quarter mill, that's about $4.25 million. We're now down to $7.25 million. Take out, just for round numbers, $2 million for potential insurance increase. We're down to $5.25 million. We take out the $1.8 million that is a part of the reserve that's designated for part of the student count not coming in at what we think the budget is. We're down to $3.4 million, which is less than 3% of the operating fund, and we're now in the position of having state oversight over our budget because we have less than 3%. If we go below 2%, they take even more action. And as Representative Robertson said earlier, the state revenue forecasts are not coming in quite like they thought they were. There is, from my information, there is definitely going to be a special session to deal with a couple of other issues. If the economic picture were to be such, I'm sure they would roll that into the call to the legislature as well. So we could end up with a mid-year cut. I don't know of many organizations that sit discussing a budget for the current year, their final budget, 2 months after that budget year has started. If we were to run it like a business, we wouldn't do that. But we operate with the rules we're given, with the playbook we're given. The uncertainty of the future, both with the continued viability of the stimulus money and what, if anything, the state government can do to replace that money in a year and a half. I think it is imperative that we as a board, as much as it goes against what I would truly like to do, but to preserve the financial integrity of this district, something we have been very good at over the last several years, something our staff has done a remarkable job in being creative and suggesting things to us to save money. I think to continue that and to give us the flexibility to deal with the unknown, we must pass this quarter-mil tax. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, Ms. Messina.
Thank you. There's little I can add, but I do feel it's important to have my rationale on record for why I will be supporting this .25. Like Mr. Swift, I never thought I'd see myself in the position of choosing to impose a higher tax amount on myself, my friends, and my community. And yet here I sit. My job requires me to look at both the short-term and the long-term fiscal health of this district. It would be easy for me to just look at the short-term and say somebody else can figure it out down the road, but that's not fair, and that's not what I was elected to do. And furthermore, I know we're in a difficult economic time, and all of us know that. And so for me to ignore that and make a decision knowing that would actually be, in my opinion, more negligent. And 2 years down the road, someone could look at me and say, geez, you know, why didn't you vote for that? You knew we were in a tough time. You knew this was going to happen. And I can't allow that to happen. So I, too, will be supporting the .25.
Thank you. This has been the most difficult decision I've had to make since I've been on the board in 9 years. I have spent many, many hours wrestling with both sides of the issue. I sympathize with the speakers this evening. I truly do understand the concerns about the economy, unemployment, high taxes, and hard times. These are not easy times. People are hurting. Ideally, I want to do what is best for students and for taxpayers. For students, I want to ensure that each receives a complete quality education, not only in the best of economic times, but in the worst of economic times. For taxpayers, I listen to you and I respect you and your opinions, and I want to ensure that your tax money is spent prudently, responsibly, and ethically. I believe that our children's futures are largely dependent on the quality of the education they receive. And the success of any community is largely dependent on the quality of its school system. And if we allow our education system and our schools to decline, we are allowing the very fabric of this community to decline as well. Because I believe it is absolutely essential that we sustain the high academic achievements won over the many years of hard work by our students and staff, and because I want to maintain the education programs and the staff necessary to meet the high standards set for our students, and because I do not want to sacrifice our students' education, it is not something that can be put off and gotten later when times are better. And because I must do what I think is in the best interest of our students and their education, I will be supporting this critical $250,000. And one more thing, and another reason I am supporting it is because of the history of this district. We have had a history of highly competent leadership, proactivity, intelligent budgeting and planning, prudent spending, and fiscal responsibility. I would not be voting for this additional $250,000 had I not thought so. Dr. Gaylor, I would tell you to find ways to tighten up the budget, to cut the fat, and to make do, but that is clearly not the case. This has been a responsible district. And had this district not had a history of continually improving student achievement, I would not be voting for this additional $250,000. I would tell Dr. Gaylor that our money was not well spent and more was not needed, but that too is clearly not the case. I will also be voting for this. Motion on the floor is to vote for the $250,000, critical need $250,000. And remember that it takes 4 out of 5 of us in order for this to pass. All those in favor of passing the critical need $250,000, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Mrs. Smith, for the record, note that it is a unanimous decision, 5-0, all board members in support of the $250,000. Thank you very much, board members. Dr. Gaylor, recommended action for the 2009-2010 district budget.
Yes, ma'am. Excuse me. I'd recommend approval of the district budget as submitted to you this evening for the fiscal year of 2009-2010.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we approve the 2009-2010 final district budget. Is there any board discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Fran, thank you so much for your work on this. We know what kind of year it's been. And the next one coming up doesn't look like it's going to be any easier. But thank you for all the time that you have spent with this. I know you've spent so much time with the board members, with community members calling you, thanks to the trim notices having your extension on it. I'm grateful for that. And thank you so much for your work on this. Mr. Brasher. We will move on to new business, the consent agenda. Dr. Gaylor.
And I would recommend approval of this consent agenda as amended this evening.
So moved. Second.
It's moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any board discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Item A, the budget amendments. Dr. Gaylor.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to ask Fran to come again to the podium and briefly describe to you the final end-of-the-year budget amendments for 2008-2009. And by the way, we have to do this, conduct business on this item and the following item, annual financial report, as per state guidelines and trim this evening. So that's why you're seeing both Fran and Greg here on these two items. Fran.
Thank you, Dr. Gaylor. And before I address the amendments, I would like to, on behalf of myself as a citizen of this county, commend this board and thank them for approving the millages that you've done to educate our children this year. And that's for me as a citizen and citizen of this county for 20, almost 30 years now. It's a great thing. Thank you.
Mr. Brasser.
The budget amendments. The budget amendments that you have before you tonight are merely a housekeeping type of item. There's no significant changes within those amendments. They're merely to keep us on track, to make sure we haven't overspent any areas within the budget. Most of those are very minor on a functional level, and that's pretty much what they are. There's nothing really significant in those.
Dr. Gaylor, recommended action.
Yes, ma'am. I'd recommend the final budget amendments of the 2008-2009 school year as submitted to you this evening.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we approve the 2008-2009 final budget amendments. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Brasser. Item B, annual financial report. Dr. Gaylor.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I know every year you're absolutely riveted by this document, these two sets of documents. And let me just ask our
not exactly sure that's the appropriate word.
Ask our Chief Finance Officer, Greg Greiner, to come to the podium and briefly give you an overview of the final annual financial report for this year. And it's not a fun document to read. It is very difficult.
I can't believe you'd say such a thing
It
about financial statements. Before you have your annual financial report and the report of financial data to the Commissioner. I think most telling thing in this financial report is the ending fund balance. That is significantly less than the beginning fund balance last year. We used significant dollars for operations. And it's reflected here, so you can see that roughly $6 million decrease in the fund balance, as Fran has previously talked about tonight in terms of preparing for the next year's budget. If there's any particular questions on the report, hopefully I can answer them. If not, we need to approve this so that we can send it up to Tallahassee this week.
Thank you. Board members? Dr. Gaylor, recommended action.
Yes, ma'am. I'd recommend that we approve the annual financial report, the 2008-2009 school year, as submitted to you this evening.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we approve the annual financial report. Is there any board discussion?
I just
Ms.
have
Messina.
one small thing, Greg. I don't know how many times you shrunk this stuff, but you cannot shrink it any smaller and expect us to try to get through it. I'm telling you, it was bad.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kreiner, for your work on this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Item C, professional services certified list. Dr. Gaylor.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. According to state statute and our own school board rules, we present you every year with a professional services certified list that is a list of professionals in engineering and architecture, HVAC, a variety of professionals that you may choose from to conduct business within the school district each year. And as we remind the board each year, this is not an exclusive list. We have to provide this list to you of these qualified professionals at this time, but at any point during the school year, if a qualified professional wishes to be added to the list for consideration to do work with the school district, we will do that. So the list in front of you could change as the school year progresses. And I would recommend that we approve the 2009-2010 professional services certified list as submitted to you this evening.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we approve the professional services certified list. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Last item, personnel action. Dr. Gaylor.
Yes, ma'am. Recommend that we approve personnel action item as submitted to you this evening.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we approve the personnel action. Is there any board discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Next, we have citizen comment. Ms. Smith, is there anyone wishing to address the board?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we have attorney comment. Mr.
Nothing
McKinley.
tonight, Madam
Thank
Chairman.
you. Board member comment. Mrs. Messina.
Thank you. I actually have two items, both of which are going to require some action on the part of the board, either tonight or at the next board meeting. The first one is the consortium legislative platform. You may recall that you sent me to represent us at the consortium meeting, which was up in, I don't even remember where last week, but we came up with a legislative program. We worked very hard at ensuring that things that would be statewide concern did not appear on the consortium platform. These are only items that relate to the districts that are part of the consortium. So I'm going to forward that document to you folks this after this meeting, and Barbara, if we can get that on the agenda for the next board meeting, we can do that. The second thing comes from the Board of County Commissioners, and that is that the Charlotte County Board of Commissioners is supporting a TIGER grant, and that stands for Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery, which basically means it's stimulus dollars for roads. And the grant is actually being submitted by Sarasota County, but it's for a four-laning of River Road, which you may or may not recall is out in Englewood, and it is the main evacuation route for the Englewood area. And the Board of County Commissioners, since I'm the Englewood area representative, approached me and asked if the school board, a school district, I'm wondering if we could give direction to the superintendent to write a letter of support for this grant application for the four-laning. It's all stimulus money. It's no money that's going to come from education to something else. But it would be great if we could get four-laning on River Road. It would help all of our citizens that live out in that area. So I would ask if the board would be willing to support such a letter of support, if we could direct the superintendent to get that out maybe by the end of the week, because they need it on their desk by the 15th.
Got it.
I already spoke with the superintendent.
And if you would just give me the exact information and who to send it to.
I'm still trying to get that from.
Then I'll get that taken care
Great.
of tomorrow.
Thank you, Mrs. Messina.
Thank you.
Ms. Seifert.
I thought I had time to relax. Really, as I get older, I think of my parents and my grandparents and how they were, oh, you know, what's this world coming to? And, oh, there's so many challenges. And I think of my grandfather who, when the Beatles were on, Ed Sullivan, he was just horrified at their long hair and their nasty look, and they were in suits and ties. And now I feel like I'm doing the same thing as I look to the future, and I think of our students, but I think they will have so many challenges. And we just have to do the very best that we can to prepare them to meet those challenges and make the decisions that they are going to have to make. And so I'm very proud of the decisions we made tonight. It's not going to make it easy. It's still going to be tight, and it's going to be difficult, but it will not be as difficult. And I look forward to seeing what our bright students will do. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Miller.
Yes, I want to remind everyone that Peter and the Wolf with Showbiz Kids is coming up on the 22nd. I think there's going to be 2 performances. We also had this article. It says, article appeared in the August issue of the Seven Seas Cruising Association newsletter, which was distributed nationwide. And on it, it says SSCA's humanitarian project, Operation Bahamas Project, package school supplies donated by members of the Florida West Coast 2008 Rendezvous. A special thanks to Lisa DeGroot, I believe, curriculum resource teacher, Meadow Park Elementary School, Port Charlotte, Florida, who coordinated the donation of language arts textbooks, workbooks, and teacher manuals for kindergarten through 5th grade. And these are usually these are materials that are no longer in use in our schools. Quality Self-Storage Punta graciously donated free storage for several months so that the volunteers could package and label the boxes. So these were going to the Bahamas for the children there. Another thing, Meadow Park, I received a newsletter. They're going to have a Chick-fil-A Spirit Night, and that again is going to be on September 17th. So if anyone's interested in being there. I feel that tonight's vote was necessary so that we can continue the standard of education that we are giving the children. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Swift.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The chairman and I will be leaving this meeting to attend for the rest of the week a meeting of the Board of Directors of the Florida School Boards Association. I am sure one of the main topics of discussion is going to be the quarter mill and who did what with it. I spoke a little bit earlier about there being an almost guarantee of a special session on the legislature in probably late October, early November. Right now, it's going to be dealing with 2 primary issues. One is the gaming compact with the Seminole Indian tribes, the ratification of the agreement that Governor Christ has come to with the tribes, and the legislature really doesn't have a whole lot of options. The Seminoles are going to do it whether we make an agreement with them or not. It's just whether or not and how much revenue they will share with the state of Florida. The biggest thing that I think is going to be extremely interesting and something I've asked the superintendent to schedule as a topic for one of our upcoming workshops is offshore drilling. That is going to be a part of the special session. And again, where will any revenues that come from offshore oil drilling leases, how that money will be dispersed and how much can be designated to education to offset the revenue issues that we're looking at in the next couple of years. It's not something that we have ever as a board talked about very much. I think it's something that we're going to need to have some discussion about to be able to pass our information along to the legislature. As part of the group of people that talk to a lot of legislators about the flexibility and the 0.25 mil and how that whole issue rose to the surface, I think the challenges in dealing with the offshore oil drilling are going to be equally as great. And as always, if any of you think of anything that I need to pass on to the rest of the executive committee of the School Board Association, please don't hesitate to let me know, and we will see that it's discussed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Swift. I don't know about you, Mr. Swift, but I sure am looking forward to that 3-hour car drive we have together this evening. 10:30, I guess we'll get there, maybe 10:45. Perfect ending to this day.
How fast long it takes at 45 miles an hour.
Yeah, I know. And I am proud that the school board has done all that we could to give our students the best education that we can possibly give them. So I'm very happy that we passed the quarter mill. And that's it for me. Dr. Gaylor?
Just two things. One, first and most importantly, for those who don't vote and don't pay taxes, meaning the youngest citizens of our community, those that are 18 years of age and younger, the kids that we educate, thank you. And secondly, to remind you that we do have a workshop next week on the 15th, and a major topic on that workshop, of course, is our insurance, our health insurance program. I think our committees have been meeting quite regularly, and we'll have some information for you that is as up-to-date as possible. It's a critical workshop, so I'm looking forward to that, and I believe that starts at 9 o'clock on the 15th. That is all I have, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening. This meeting is adjourned.